Have you ever noticed that your main focus is on the anxiety and not necessarily on what it's going to feel like when you are beyond it? And how do you really know that you're on the right track?
Hi, this is Dr. Friedemann, and you're watching Empowerment Solutions.
You know that one of the biggest hurdles for us to get better when we're anxious is that we are naturally looking more at whatever the anxiety feels like or the triggers that can cause the anxiety, or we are wondering, when does the anxiety come back? Anxiety, anxiety, anxiety. And we're not really asking ourselves, did I make any progress? Did I actually move forward? Am I on the right track? Let's say you want to go to Paris. How would you know that you're actually there? Well, you look for the Eiffel Tower or Notre Dame, and maybe you hear all these people talking French, and you realize, oh, that looks like, smells like, sounds like Paris. I must be there. Have you ever asked yourself, how does it sound, feel, look like when I am beyond my anxiety? Or at least when I feel like I am getting traction, I am moving in the right direction. Have you ever defined those convincers for yourself? Because that's really important. If we don't know which way we are going and if we are making progress, a part of our mind just feels like we are treading waters or running in circles, and we're not really getting anywhere. And that's easily deflating. And that is when we are starting to identify ourselves with a problem, then owning that we have the solution. Today, I want to talk about those convincers. How do you know that you are making progress when it comes to healing and overcoming your anxiety? Here are 10 different ways you can say to yourself, yes, I am making progress. So the first way to tell that you're making progress when it comes to overcoming anxiety is having a microphone at your head and listening to your thoughts. Now, many of my clients I start working with, I let them write down their negative thoughts, anxious, insecure, but also thoughts about shame or sadness or anger, so that we have an inventory of what's going on up there. A lot of those thoughts are triggering anxiety. And often when we feel anxious, we don't really realize how we were thinking right before we had that feeling. So when you notice that there are less thoughts, that all of a sudden there is more like crickets up there, and maybe those thoughts are not as mean or as intense as they used to be, you know that you're making progress. So keep a log on those thoughts and just notice when you are realizing that you can counterbalance them, that you can question them, that you can also say, no, I'm not that person. I'm not going down this rabbit hole. When you realize that your mind starts listening to you, then you know you're also making progress with your anxiety. Do you know that you have, besides the negative thoughts, also other anxiety triggers that just, like an alarm clock triggers you to get up, or the phone, when it rings, triggers you to pick it up? There are certain triggers that make your anxiety show up. So that can be when you are having lack of sleep, or when you are procrastinating and meeting a deadline, or when you have low blood sugar because you didn't really have any breakfast, or when you are just always running behind, you put too much on your plate. There are many triggers that you may have identified or may need to identify that make your anxiety worse. So when you notice now that I know those triggers and I do actually take care of those triggers to either disappear or to be more mindful about them, then you also notice, wow, the anxiety is in my hands more and I'm making progress. The most obvious way to know that you're making progress with anxiety is when you know it just doesn't show up that much. And when it shows up, it's not as intense, it's not as long lasting, and it is also something that doesn't really spoil your entire day. Now, the problem with many people I've been working with anxiety, it's an all or nothing proposition. Either they feel anxious or they don't. In other words, as soon as they feel for 5 minutes anxious a day, they tell themselves, here it goes again, I'm feeling anxious. And they're not really realizing that, hey, it's only short and it wasn't really that big of a deal and I moved on very quickly. So in order for you to know that you're making progress, really take an anxiety log approach where you write down every day on a scale from 1 to 10, how intense was the anxiety? How long did it last? How did I get out of it? What did I do? And then what was the rest of my day like? If you have a little curve, a little graph that you can draw and you can see, whoa, it gets less and less and less and less and less, you're actually feeling encouraged again because you're more scientific and more like in your research mind, investigating what is my anxiety actually doing? And is what I'm doing working? Really keep a log to know that you're moving forward. Another way to know that you're making progress with your anxiety is when you do feel the anxiety, you're not freaking out. Because in the past, you may have felt anxious and immediately you were throwing your hands up in the air and say, oh, here it is, and feel overwhelmed, just like I have many times, because the anxiety feels so powerful and also paralyzing. But if you know that, oh, I remember when I have anxiety, I'm going to do some breathing. I'm going to do some writing of my thoughts. I can walk. Sometimes the tool of just shaking your body or dancing it out or doing some exercise works, talking to the inner child. There are so many tools that you may have already gathered in your toolbox on what to do when you're anxious. Know that you use them successfully and that your anxiety is no longer this overwhelming force that keeps you trapped, but it's something that you can respond to and that you can say, hey, I know exactly what to do. Just when I have growling my stomach, I eat something. Just when my eyes fall closed because I'm so tired, I take a nap. You have tools now in your hands that help you to overcome the anxiety. And when you do, then you know I'm on the right track. The anxiety is more something now I can manage, I can deal with, and you're well on your way to healing it. A classic anxiety problem is that when you don't feel anxious, you wonder when it comes back. I mean, I don't know how many times I was waking up in the morning expecting the anxiety to either jump on me or be at the side of my bed and just, start taking over the day. So when you notice that you're not afraid anymore that the anxiety comes back, you're kind of saying, okay, it's like, I don't know if it's going to rain or not, but I have an umbrella. I have some gear. Back to the toolbox that I just mentioned before, I know what to do. If that secondary anxiety, the fear of your own emotions, gets less and less, if you're no longer seeing yourself as broken because of these emotions that at times get triggered and come up, then you know you are on the right track. What's so interesting when you are anxious is that pretty much it's the only emotion really you entertain all day long. When we're anxious, there's not a lot of room for any other feelings. And sometimes I have to ask my clients, do you remember how it feels to be content? Or maybe excited or happy or grumpy? All of those emotions, this whole array, seem to be pushed aside by that strong anxiety. Now, when you are noticing, though, that over time you're feeling more again, like a client of mine who told me that she was so anxious for such a long time that when her father got ill and was in the hospital, all she could feel is this anxiety about, oh my God, what's going to happen with him now? When she made progress with her anxiety, that anxiety for her father got changed into empathy and compassion. And she could actually sit next to him and just hold his hand and be sad, but also feel that deep, warm feeling of compassion for him because she knew that he was struggling. It was almost as if something opened up to another emotional array, to another feelings that they had that were buried for quite some time. So when you see on your path to healing your anxiety that more emotions are budding up, that you have a wider range of feelings, again, you're on the right track. Did you ever notice when you're anxious that you don't really see the bigger picture? You don't really have a higher perspective. All you see is life through tunnel vision. You feel somehow focused on that, whatever makes you anxious. And if you don't really know what makes you anxious, you feel the focus, the energy goes all onto the anxiety itself. So when you are realizing that you can shift focuses more easily, that you can realize, okay, I'm anxious right now, but I can also focus on the work at hand, or maybe on my daughter playing in the sandbox, or I can think about what I want to have for dinner and give that a little bit of attention. When you realize that you're more easily shifting out of this tunnel vision and seeing the world more wide, and maybe again from an eagle's eye perspective, realizing that's not a big deal, it's gonna be okay, you're definitely on the right track. 2 ways to know that your anxiety is no longer holding you hostage and that you are starting to free yourself and outgrow the anxiety is when you are kinder to yourself. When you notice that you actually like yourself more and that you see more other sides about yourself, not only the things that you feel are wrong with you. And that is when you start to no longer identify yourself with a diagnosis or with a feeling, I am anxious, this is all I am. And you see, no, there is more to me. I can also see my kindness. I can also see my curiosity, my creativity, my sense of humor. When you widen your perspective on yourself and see that anxiety is just one small aspect of you that you don't really have to fear, that is also a sign that you have come a long ways. And that goes hand in hand with when you realize that the anxiety is not your enemy. Your anxiety is not what's here to torment you or keep you imprisoned, but the anxiety is simply a messenger, something that ultimately made you aware of something. Maybe it made you aware of the triggers of the past that made you live life in a very small utilitarian comfort zone. Maybe, like in my case, it made me aware of that I was completely on the wrong path, that staying in this busy university hospital as in cardiology wasn't really what I was supposed to do. And it helped me to find my meaning and purpose in life. Or maybe it helps you to say, no, I need to work on discovering who I really am. I have been identifying myself so much with other people and what they expect me to be or what they want me to be, that I didn't really ask, what about my self-worth? What is really good about me? So the anxiety may have also helped you to go on this inner journey of discovery. So when you're starting to realize, even though it's a hard school, that healing anxiety is also something that's rewarding because it brings you closer to yourself and it really forces you to take an inventory and change the ways you have been treating yourself and change the beliefs that you were holding on to and change the way you have been looking at life. These are also clear signs that the anxiety is starting to be behind you and no longer this huge boulder in front of you. And ultimately, how do you know that you outgrew your anxiety? You know when you're not really looking for the absence of anxiety to be convinced that you have won the battle or that you have healed that anxiety issue, but that you have shifted your focus onto trusting yourself, knowing that you can deal with anything that life brings you, knowing that you can deal with the anxiety or any kind of unforeseeable circumstances that you were always afraid of. And when you trust yourself, and when you trust also that life can be bigger again, that you can get out of this comfort zone of security and predictability and explore life again and find out what else is possible for you. And also find out what else is it about you? What other gifts and qualities do you have inside of you that you can share with the world? Then you know you're no longer stuck in anxiety. You know that this trust and this kindness and this curiosity is that new you that is emerging from this anxiety. And the anxiety was in many ways the catalyst that got you there. So these are 10 ways for you to know that I am on the right track. And maybe they can also be for you now that you may be starting to heal your anxiety, signposts along the way, where you're asking yourself, well, what if I focus on that? What if I focus on my thoughts? What if I focus on just not really ignoring my triggers, but exploring them and taking responsibility for them? What if I eventually open up my heart again and don't fear the anxiety, but try to just take care of it and be more compassionate with it? And what if in the end, who I become is a much better version than the person I used to be before the anxiety woke me up?
Hi, Dr. Friedemann here. Thank you for tuning into my YouTube channel. If you're interested in learning more about fear and anxiety, here you'll find guided meditations, webinars, and interviews with some of the most renowned experts in the field of empowerment. Delve into the over 230 videos and more to come every week.